Good morning. Good morning. This is Dr. Pete signing on. We have another Keto Makes Me Healthy session today, and I'm a little bit early on purpose because if we're late at all, that shuts down our Facebook Live sessions in our groups. And so I am a little bit early. If you're here too, be patient for a few minutes because we're not only live here on Facebook and on YouTube, but we also are going to be live in Clubhouse. All right. And I need to set that up right now. Morning, T-Bone.
Morning, Dad. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right. We're live on Clubhouse right now, along with YouTube. T, you know what I forgot to do?
What?
We need to put into our title. Can we do that? Yeah, hold on. I'm going to do it right now. Okay. Morning, good morning. I had to add to I forgot to put the recorded into our title. So I've done that. I don't know that it's showing it in here in the room, but it should be showing it outside. All right.
I don't think it's showing it inside the room, but I think it is outside. Yeah, it is outside. So
It is showing it outside?
yes, we're good to go.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Pete and T, and we are starting our last masterclass session. This is our 5th session here, and today the focus is going to be on the 2 different methodologies to be able to track how your keto is progressing, and we will gravitate to that fairly quickly. We are live on YouTube, at Facebook, and in Clubhouse as I speak. So the first thing that I want to cover is that is my why. So I'm Dr. Pete, and I was pre-diabetic, also a gout sufferer 3 years ago. And so when that happened to me, sorry, you guys, I'm still trying to navigate a few things here. Okay, so when I was diagnosed with prediabetes, and the gout diagnosis actually happened before that, I realized in my life that I was on a cascade towards full-blown diabetes and other more serious chronic diseases that follow from that. And for me, this was a massive awakening on not just a personal level, but a family level, and in other aspects of my life as well, because I just now turned 63 a few weeks ago, about a month ago, actually now. When I was diagnosed with prediabetes, I was 60, and I was 57 or 58 when I was diagnosed with gout. So most chronic diseases, and I'm not sure if the audience is aware of this, when you get diagnosed for them and the numbers actually pop up not in your favor, usually this is because you've been eating a certain way for many decades, and that certain way is the standard American diet, which is really high in refined carbohydrates, refined sugars, and so on. And many people, including myself, think that over those decades they're actually eating in a healthy way. And then you find out when you start delving into this that there were lots of fundamental ways in which that idea is actually wrong. So I was pretty frustrated with the medical establishment right out of the gate, because when you do a literature search in this area, like you just get on the internet and you start searching diabetes, the establishment is pretty clear about this, that they do management versus reversing these conditions. And when you look at what the outcomes are, people that are diabetic, there can be amputation down the road, kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, all these really wicked things. And in particular for people that are in their 50s and 60s who are active and they are looking towards the future, right? Like I had no intention of just sitting down on the couch and accepting the progression of a chronic disease. Where does that leave you? I have a daughter who's in my clubhouse room right now, who's part of our live sessions here, part of the company that her and I run to help people now reverse these conditions. She's going to be married someday and have kids, and I want to be around for the grandchildren and see the marriage. I have an incredible wife. We do things, we travel, we have all these things that we do together. We go into the Grand Canyon, we have these experiences, and I'm not ready in any sort of way to throw my sucker in the dirt and go, well, it's all over now, right? And in fact, I even have some friends who even take it a step further, and they're like, well, I'm not planning to be around for that business. And I'm sitting here going, no, I don't think so, right? I'm a rock climber and a cave diver, and I just got done speaking about my family, and I got plans, right? And those plans don't include sitting in a nursing home with one foot cut off on an oxygen bottle, right? So the question is, and this is what I went through on a personal level, is how do you contend with these chronic diseases, the diabetes, the cardiovascular disease, the kidney disease, and so on? Is there a way to reverse this? And it took some months of struggle and research for me to find my way to the ketogenic lifestyle. And I got here, and I was able to reverse my diabetes in 52 days based on my fasting glucose and my A1C. And I was inspired at that point to help people, right? And I think, especially in Clubhouse, if you get around to these rooms, this is the one thing that we all have in common, especially the coaches. We have lived through this experience of essentially hopelessness at first, and then the anger with it, right? Because we have believed that we've been eating correctly all these years, right? Based on the government standards, right? The balanced meal, the carbohydrates sitting at the bottom of the pyramid, the big fatty fruit bowl that I had every single day with massive amounts of sugar. That, by the way, massive amounts of fruit that, by the way, were loaded with sugar. Every single day before I ate anything else, with the exception of coffee, and went out the door, right? I did this for decades. And then I ended up in the situation that I was in, thinking all along that I was eating right. And to be fair about it and up front, I did have some habits that were unhealthy, for sure, that I didn't realize at the time were having an impact on my body, like the 3 beers I had every single day, and the big fatty chocolate bar that I had most nights. I used to buy the big ones, and then I ate at least half of that thing right before I went to sleep, not realizing the impact it was having on my insulin expression and the progression in chronic disease. So this was the inspiration that led me to getting with my daughter, who also had her own reasons for doing the keto lifestyle. And then we progressed in the way that we did, and we've recovered from our respective chronic issues. Now, one of the things that comes up that I've encountered recently is, does my kind of expertise matter, right? Does it matter about the science, right? And being able to navigate or go back into all of the different aspects of human biology and trying to understand what the best way is to do this keto lifestyle, with the idea of number one, obtaining better health, being able to reverse chronic conditions successfully, like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, for example, of which 80% of the obese have health complications. There's only 20% of people that are significantly overweight into the obese range that have metabolics that are on the healthy side. The other 80% do not. So how and these are only the three primary groups, right? There's a lot of people out there who are suffering from metabolic issues like migraines, PCOS, right? Polycystic ovarian syndrome, gout. I am a gout sufferer. What are the consequences of the keto lifestyle for a gout sufferer? Is this something that a gout sufferer can do, as an example? And if so, is it even a good idea to be on the keto diet as a gout sufferer, right? These are some of the questions. And I want to help everybody that I can come in contact with this knowledge and with coaching if they want it, so that they can improve the health in their life. So for people coming into our Clubhouse room right now, and maybe people that are coming late into our YouTube and our Facebook channel, so we're live. Remember, this is a recorded session because of the system I'm using automatically makes an MP4 of this, which we load onto our YouTube channel unedited, by the way. We don't edit these things. We really encourage people to ask questions. So right now, what I'm talking about is how I got into this lifestyle in the first place, which was for deep personal reasons, because I was suffering from chronic disease. And chronic disease, if you're in my age group, in your 60s, it's not reversed like that. I just talked a little bit about my numbers that I had reversed prediabetes in 52 days based on the A1C and on my fasting glucose, right? But diabetes has a much bigger impact on your organ systems than just fasting glucose and an A1C, right? Our culture tends to focus, they're glucose centric when it comes to chronic diseases, which means they focus on what your glucose levels are in your blood. And you can see that every night when you watch the 6 o'clock news, right? It's one advertisement after another on diabetes medications. So what if you have a way of reversing that condition and being able not to have to take those medications? Think about that for a minute. So is it automatic? If somebody is a serious type 2 diabetic, and I work with some of those guys, are they going to reverse? I mean, serious levels, like, sugars that are in the 300s in the morning, they're taking, diabetic medications at that point. Are they going to reverse this condition in a few weeks? Well, the answer is no. But if they go on the ketogenic diet and they're compliant with it, right, they keep the carbs low and they do really well with that, then over 1, 2, 3 years, they can completely reverse that condition. This is well known in the literature now, especially if you follow groups like Verta Health, for example, who actually treats patients, does the science, and they have the results, right? And similarly, if you're in a situation where you are significantly overweight, you've struggled for years with the yo-yo dieting, the calorie restriction, becoming hungrier and hungrier until you finally just break down and start eating again, the keto lifestyle may well be for you, because the bottom line is the reason why the overweightness exists in the first place is because of the high chronic expression of insulin in your system, because in the standard American diet, the percentage of carbohydrates that are being eaten on a daily basis, well north of 300 grams of carbs a day, and a high proportion of that being the refined sugars. By just literally dropping the sugars alone, if you just do that, right, you don't even think about starting to cut into complex carbs yet, you can lose weight and you can do it well. Are there nuances about this that have to do with age and sex? Yeah, of course there are. And that's why the diet itself, the lifestyle itself, can be tricky. Now, there are, and this is kind of what I want to segue to. Maybe we should reset the room really quick, T. And so I'm going to stop and let you talk, and then I'll jump in again.
Okay, this is developed for everyone. My dad is a keto health coach, and then I'm kind of like the business individual on the behind the scenes. But this specific room is our 5th episode or session of basically the Keto Makes Me Healthy program, and this is specific to intuitive eating or macros. Everyone does everything different, and so we just kind of wanted to drop in today and make this a topic of conversation because we hear it a lot in other rooms as well as with our clients. Macros or intuitive eating come up frequently. So again, just to reset the room, this is Keto Makes Me Healthy, intuitive eating or macro counting.
So first, let's just talk briefly about where the methodologies came from. And this is the importance of the science, right? I feel very strongly you cannot ignore the science. And one of the reasons I feel that way is because when I was first diagnosed with prediabetes and I was looking at the medical literature, which is what you're going to find if you do a simple search on Google. You're going to hit all that stuff way before you actually get to good science that's underneath it, because you have to search a little harder to find that. You do. And so it took me a while, which built my frustration about my own situation and my own hopelessness, which is why, coming back to this, that I was inspired to help people, to help them to cut through that learning curve and be able to help people be able to advance quickly into reversing their chronic issues, right? So let's just talk about this for a minute, right? Because the keto diet didn't just, maybe some people think it just came onto the scene a few years ago. And you're going to run into people, especially in clubhouse rooms, that have been doing the ketogenic lifestyle for a while. And when they tell you that they came out of the desert, they're pretty much right. Because it was very hard in those days, a few years ago, literally, even when I came in, to be able to find a conglomeration of data to try and understand this way of living, this way of eating, and where it came from, and how did the methodologies come to be that people are using, all right, to do this. And so it's really important to understand that Banting in the 1860s was the first guy to really write about this. And he was an undertaker, somebody who was obese and significantly overweight. And he understood, I believe, on an intuitive level, that he was carb addicted. I think he understood that. And also there was an issue with alcohol, right? And in particular, the sugary wines, right? So he sorted out, because, and then even if you look further back, you can see that the French were utilizing this way of eating 100 years before that, but they weren't writing about it. Banting was the first guy to write about it. And basically what he did was, it was really simple. He cut the sugars out of his life, right? He stopped eating bread. He stopped eating pastries. He cut the wine out, right? I don't think he stopped drinking, but he significantly cut down on it. And then he tracked what happened, and his weight went down, right? He lost significant amounts of weight, and he wrote a pamphlet, which was widely circulated in Europe and in the United States. That's why these days, especially if you go hang out in forums around Australia and South Africa, they still call this the Banting way of eating, right? And then in the early 1900s, we have a medical establishment that was desperate to find a solution for diabetics, right? And in those days, the way that they were diagnosing somebody who had serious diabetes was the sugar that was coming out in their urine. They noticed that when you tasted it, it was sweet, And then secondly, when someone peed on the ground, man, the flies just were like, they were just attracted to that in swarms, right? And what was it about the urine? It was the sugar in the urine. And there was a really crucial paper that was published by three doctors in 1921. And this was a year later, insulin would be discovered, but I don't want to get off on that tangent yet. And these three doctors talked about the approach that was being used to reverse diabetes in those days. And I'm going to say reverse diabetes and lose weight and all that business. And I'm going to put quotes around it, because even in those days, these guys actually quantitated biomarkers, right? They had these people, their patients, actually weighing food out. And they developed, if you're wondering where the approved list of foods has come from, right? What I call in my sessions quite a bit the green list. If you're wondering where that came from, you got to look at this 1921 paper. That's where it came from. Has it been refined since then? Yes, it has. Of course it has. So, you can look at these lists and you can see which vegetables, as an example, are safe for those of us in the keto lifestyle to eat, pretty much. And these are going to be things like zucchini, yellow squash, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, chayote squash, and even okra, although you need to be careful with okra because it has a little bit extra carbs in it, right? But if you're wondering, where did that come from? Well, its origin is from that 1921 paper. And when I get into a discussion in various forums here on YouTube with people that are asking questions with the Clubhouse situation and so on, and they're asking, they're raising issues about, all right, measuring biomarkers is such a pain in the neck, right? Well, here's the thing. Way back in 1921, not only were they weighing food, they were weighing the people. They were also measuring glucose. Now, you got to ask, how were they doing that, right? Because these days we can finger stick. It's very easy to finger stick. There are good meters on the market, like I use the Keto Moho, and I can get accurate values for my fasting glucose. And just like the people that I coach, I measure my biomarkers every day. I think it's just a new habit. And it also enables accountability to myself, but it's also massively powerful, because we talk about, in the Clubhouse rooms, we talk about, I talk about this with my clients. I talk about this on my YouTube channel. The fact that you can measure biomarkers is powerful. It allows you to put your future health in your hands, so you can make decisions more accurately about what you're eating, right? And how your situation is progressing. All right. And I want to point out that the patients that worked with Wilder et al., there were three of these medical doctors in 1921, they had to agree to do this. And listen to how they measure the glucose. Every morning they had to pee, I'm just going to use the term pee in a cup. And then they had to take their urine and distribute it across a set of test tubes. Then they had to add a chemical to it. And I'm going to just keep this simple. I'm not going to go into the detail, but you can see it if you get the paper. And then once they added the chemical, they had to heat those solutions up. Just imagine if you had to do that. If I was asking you to do that every single morning, all right, I'd be totally behind. That is a pain in the ass. Do I really want to do that? I got to pee in a cup. I have to distribute it across some test tubes. I got to add some chemicals to it. And then I got to heat this stuff up in boiling water. And what am I looking for? A color change. And these guys had to do that to be part of the program. And if they saw dark red after the color change, after heating their urine sample, then they knew that they ate too many carbs the day before. Now, why am I giving you this example? Because number one, testing for sugar in urine is about as inaccurate of a situation as possible, because even if they, in this lifestyle, push somebody back to the point where they're not getting the dark red in the urine anymore, their fasting glucose is still going to be way, way north of where we know these days where you want it. But that was the best that they could do. And they were bringing people out of comas. They were doing amazing things. Now, about a year after that, is when insulin was discovered, and that changed the face of how the medical establishment looks at chronic diseases, actually. And there were other things that happened too, but basically we started thinking along the lines of, if you get sick, give me a pill, and now that's going to fix it. And one thing about the keto lifestyle is it's not a pill. And that's almost a direct quote from Dr. Sarah Hallberg, who you can find her interviews and whatnot all over YouTube. This is a lifestyle, right? It takes practice. It takes learning, what you can eat and what you can't eat. And there's no like black and whiteness to this. And what I mean by that comment is that everybody, as is pointed out a lot in these sessions, is an individual. We all have slightly different metabolics. What does that mean? We all have different tolerances to carbohydrates, literally. Some of us can tolerate more, some of us less. If I get more than 50 grams of total carbs in a day, then I know my fasting glucose is going to be high the next day. I mean, and how do I know that? Because I rigorously measure biomarkers. So this brings me to basically the two methodologies that are fairly common. And I would say, depending on the forum that we're in my YouTube channel, I think most of the people that are listening to me right now understand about rigorously measuring biomarkers. And I teach the intuitive method, so I'm going to talk about that right now first. And what is the intuitive method? Well, in part, we use the knowledge that came before us. We know that if we're eating green listed vegetables, that we're pretty safe because the total carbs in those vegetables and the fiber and whatnot is good, right? And we know that we can eat a fair amount of that stuff without getting over 50 grams of carbs per day. And I'm going to come back to that level here in a second and talk a little bit more about that. So I teach the plate method, where you split a plate into 3 sections. And we're not talking about quantitation here. We're just talking about taking a plate and cutting it into 3 parts. And on one part of the plate, you've got your protein, whatever it is. If you made chicken, if it's a steak, a pork chop, ground meat of some type, or some type of casserole, whatever, that has the main protein portion in it. And basically what I tell the people that I discuss this with is that it should be about the size of a deck of cards to a fat man's wallet. All right. And then, or I don't mean fat man. I always do that. Sorry, I misspoke. I mean of the fat wallet of a man, right? Our wallets tend to get pretty thick, and you put them into your back pocket and your back pocket is sticking way out. So that's what I meant to say. Sorry about that. All right. And then what we have in the other 2 sections would be the green listed vegetables the size of a fist, right? And then what I normally couple that with is a large, what I call Bamo salad, which is loaded with dark green vegetables and other green listed vegetables. And eating this way, my target is 50 grams of total carbs per day. How do I know I'm hitting that? Because number one, I rigorously test my biomarkers. So not only my fasting glucose, my ketones, right? And other things, my weight, and also my blood pressure. And I do this every single day. And I know there's a lot of controversy about this way of measuring biomarkers. So just allow me right now to talk about this. And then we will shift to the macronutrient methodology that we hear, I think, quite fairly, mostly in the clubhouse environment, right? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So by doing this, here's what I can tell you about my own progress in the last almost 3 years now. My weight has decreased 19% overall in the last 2.5 years. How do I know this? Because I measure it, and I measure it every single day. Does this require a different kind of mindset? Yes, it does. You have to think about this a different way, because you get on a scale and that can become a really stressful situation. I get that. I understand that. But the reason why I'm measuring and these are the 4 key biomarkers: my weight, blood pressure, my glucose, and my ketones. And the reason I'm doing it every day is because I want to be able to look at accurately at the trends in my own life, so I can understand what my weight is doing, so I can understand what my glucose tolerance is, right? How much carbohydrate can I eat before I start to get into trouble? So the glucose is going to tell me that, and the ketones are definitely going to tell me that, because they are super sensitive to changes in insulin expression. So what has my blood pressure done in the last year? In the last year alone, my blood pressure has gone down 5%. 5%. I was hypertensive when I went into this stuff, right? I keep coming back to my own story, right? And we all have stories how we got here. And the prediabetes, the gout, I was hypertensive, I was overweight, the list goes on, right? Well, just in the last year, my blood pressure has dropped 5%. I've normalized my blood pressure at this point over 2.5 years. My blood glucose is averaging around 87 right now. I'm going to talk about another number in a second that's going to be lower than this. So when I say 87, you got to understand that the reason why it's 87 is because in this average is not just my fasting values, also my post-meal, my pre-meal, post-meals, my glucose values before and after exercise, you name it, it's in here. That's my average over the last year, right? And then my ketones average about 1.3, right? And this morning my ketones were 1.0. Now, because I measure what's the situation with the ketones and why do we even care? The situation with the ketones is that they are profoundly sensitive to the amount of insulin expression going on. So I target between 0.5 millimolar and 3 millimolar for my ketones. And I know that if I'm in there between 1 and 2 on average, right, and over the course of a day, I'm not out of ketosis, I know that I'm maximizing in my body my capabilities to do fat burning. And I know, because I measure also other biomarkers, I'm going to get to those in a second, that I think are important, that I have for sure reversed my prediabetes. And in other ways, the dyslipidemia that I had, right, the abnormalities that I saw in my HDL, my triglycerides and things like that, they've been reversed. How do I know? Because I measure, there's 14 biomarkers that normally I look at. Just to go through this really quickly, my fasting glucose when I was diagnosed with prediabetes was 109. My A1C is 5.8. Most recently, which was about a week and a half ago, my fasting glucose is now 74. This is a laboratory result, but my finger sticking matched this result. And my A1C is 5.0. All right, my insulin expression is low. The fasting insulin is low, so is my C-peptide. The two numbers actually line up, so it's a 1-to-1 relationship. When you test this HOMA-IR for insulin resistance, that value is 0.1. I mean, like, you know, I've reversed the diabetes for sure. When we look at triglycerides, my triglycerides have lowered. My HDL has gone up substantially. All the other ratios that you can look at in the lipids have moved in the correct directions. My HSCRP, which is a protein that's measured to give you a snapshot of cardiovascular risk. It's the word is escaping me right now, has gone in the right direction. All right. It's actually really, really low. My value that I just did 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago is 0.3, just as an example. All right. So coming back to the way that I advocate for the lifestyle is using the plate method. It's an intuitive method. You eat off the green list. You keep the protein levels the size of a fat wallet. And then you use biomarker monitoring to sort out whether you're at 50 grams per total carbs per day or not. And the way that you do that, and this is the thing about that number that most people don't realize, is the way that you do this is by understanding your glucose in relationship to the ketones. And if you keep the ketones between 0.5 and 3, what this tells you is you're managing the total number of carbs per day very, very well, and you're at 50 or less. This is an average number that's come from monitoring patients, and in particular in the Virtus studies. That's where that number comes from. It's not this magical thing that's calculated. It's by seeing where someone needs to be on average in their ketones and what that means in total, in terms of total carbs. Now, when we turn to the macronutrient methodology for this, and maybe right before I start down this road, I'm going to let you reset the room quick and see if there's anyone who wants to. Okay, I see that Ada's just listening. So go ahead and reset the room.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Keto Makes Me Healthy. This is our 5th session of the Keto Makes Me Healthy program that we've kind of put together on Clubhouse, as well as we're live on YouTube and Facebook. And this is intuitive eating versus macros. And again, because this is a topic that comes up into a lot of different rooms, as well as a topic or a question that comes up in a lot of different ways, this is something that we really wanted to talk about and just kind of explain the history as well. So again, this is a Keto Makes Me Healthy, intuitive versus macros. Session 5.
Okay, so now turning to the macronutrient methodology. So the first thing that one needs to understand about this right out of the gate is that this came from the idea of calories in, calories out. This is, and we still, the medical establishment is still just hammering this down our throats. And if you go into, any sort of discussion, if I go to my CrossFit gym, or at least the one that I used to be at, and I try to have a discussion with a trainer, the likelihood they're going to hit you with this, that weight loss, diabetes, all that business is just about how many calories you're eating is quite high. So the first thing is the macronutrient methodology for figuring out where you are carb-wise on any given day. Its evolutionary origins, to use a word, is from calories in and calories out. That's where it came from. The next thing is assuming you have to choose a starting point. Where am I going to start with this? The total number of the total number of calories that I'm eating every day. What is that value? And when you get into, you go and you look in the literature for this and you really start to pound it out, you understand that this is a complete estimation. All right. And for my example today, I'm choosing 2,200 calories as being my starting point. And if you were to ask me how many calories am I eating every single day right now, honestly, I'm not really even sure, because in the keto lifestyle, I've learned very quickly, and I teach this, that we're eating to satiety, right? And there are other evolutionary things that happen. Now I'm using the word in another way. Once you start this lifestyle, one of which is that you start eating fewer meals every single day. And that's because when we do eat, the fat and the protein is so satiating that we don't have the urge to eat after we've had a keto meal like that, right? And so one of the things that's important about this, and this doesn't matter on the methodologies, it's going to be the same difference, is that we learn not to eat again until we actually are hungry, right? And the signaling in us for that is different than somebody who's eating the standard American diet. So we just choose a top calorie to start with, 2,200. How would you know actually how many calories that you need? Well, truthfully, you would need to do some biomarker measuring for that. And if you really wanted to know where you fall in that range, how many calories do you need? Well, part of that's going to do with your body type, right? And how you react to the carbohydrates that you eat, right? And your level of activity, and everyone's different. I'm a CrossFit athlete, and even though I'm not going to a CrossFit gym, I do my own programming now, and I'm very, very active. So like that has to be taken into consideration because the amount of calories that you're burning matters. So we start with choosing a number somewhere, and I chose 2,200. I actually struggled with this. What do I choose for this example? Do I go with 2,500? Do I go with 2,000? If I do a common calculation that is out in the literature, it would suggest for somebody my body weight, without even taking into consideration my level of activity, somewhere around 1840. And I see that number and I go, okay, I think I'm going to be hungry a lot. And that's probably accurate. Now, so you have to choose the value. Where are you going to fall for that? And there are other calculations. If you visit Jonathan Shane's website, for example, he has a calculation that you can use, which is valid, right? It's a valid estimator. And that's the important point here. It's an estimation. You can use, you input your body weight, there's some other factors there, your activity level, and then it spits out a number. And he's the first one that's going to tell you, and he's an expert in this area and helping with weight loss, that this is an estimation and that we're going to have to play with this. But you have a starting point. And then you've got to decide how many carbs you're going to want, right? And for a lot of us, we're going to want to be 5% or under, especially if we're trying to reverse prediabetes or if we're trying to have an impact in a positive way in cardiovascular disease, or we want to lose weight. We need to get the carbs down. And I'm in this session, I'm not going to have the time to go into this other argument. What do you want to be in net or total? So I'm just going to say we advocate for total carbs, and we want to be about 50 grams total carbs per day or under that, right? And whether you're under, again, is going to depend on where you are in your chronic disease state, where you are with that, right? So you make the decision on that. And just understand that the total number of carbs that you're figuring for yourself it's pretty arbitrary. And you're going to calculate how many grams of carbs that you can have over the course of the day by just multiplying that number by 5%. And then how do you figure the protein, right? Well, the standard equation that everyone tends to use is going to be a number that is 1.5 grams up to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. All right. And when you do that calculation, where do you fall? 1.5 or 2? For me, because I'm so athletic and I'm working out a lot with intense exercises, I'm eating protein on the upper end of this. And just as a quick segue from this, you can go listen to a lot of stuff coming from Ben Bickman, who advocates for pushing protein up in the keto lifestyle because of the relationship between insulin and glucagon. But I'm transgressing there. So you figure out what your protein's going to be. Again, this is also an estimate. And this is going to allow you to figure out what percentage of the 2,200 is going to be in the protein. And then all of the rest of it is going to be in fat. Now, the origin of this number, and this kind of delves into a chemistry understanding, is because way back in 1921, these guys were using calorimetry to determine the amount of calories that you can get from a particular macronutrient. What is calorimetry? Okay, you take 1 gram of a particular kind of fat and you burn it. You then track or quantitate the amount of energy that came out of that fat that you burned. And now that represents, in general, the amount of calories that you can get of energy per gram of that macronutrient. And for fats, the general number is 9 calories per gram of fat burned. For carbohydrates, it's 4 calories per gram. And for protein, it's also 4 grams per calorie. Now everyone sits back and goes, all right, now we can utilize this information to figure out, what we're burning. But here is the central problem with that. Neither the fats nor the protein are burned in a human in the way that calorimetry describes them. This is not what we do, especially in a keto lifestyle where we've dropped the carbs, dropped the insulin expression. Now our body is doing what's called partitioning. So what does that mean in English? It means that when you've got, let's say you eat 10 grams of protein, and when that 10 grams of protein gets broken down and shows up in the blood supply, in the liver and whatnot, the body goes, okay, dudes, we've got this range of different amino acids. We have this range of protein, and we have this range of different fats that have all shown up. Now, what are our needs? If we need structural things in a membrane, some of the fat's going to be used to build up membranes. Some of the fats and the proteins is a similar situation. A lot of protein is used structurally in our cells to allow cells to have integrity and shape and so on, right? Some of the protein is used to make enzymes. These are the molecular factories that go around and they do stuff, right? So not all the protein is burned for energy, and neither is the fat. The stuff is split up. And then when the body gets done doing all the things that are absolutely required for us to stay alive, right? And it's looking around because, it got a certain amount of carbohydrates that's already either been used to go into glycogen or it's been burned directly, right? To get energy, to get ATP, right? The money currency to do things. Then the body's going to look at the fat and the protein budget and go, well, here's what's left over, right? And if you don't have enough for fuel, then it's going to go to your body fat. And this is one of the central reasons why we lose weight on the ketogenic diet, right? Now, some of you may be wondering, is it possible to overeat on the ketogenic diet? And yeah, sure it is, man. If you sit down and you're just like hammering thousands of calories, into your stomach, you're in a situation where you're going to be storing a lot of that. Sure. I mean, you can overeat, but keep in mind that we're eating to satiety, right? Versus the standard American diet way of eating, which is eating, their way of thinking, am I full, is when their stomach is stretched so far, they feel like you couldn't put one more thing in there. Whereas I'm eating to the point where I go, well, I'm not hungry anymore. And I've adjusted my portion size now after 3 years or almost 3 years to accommodate that. I know how much I'm going to eat. So this assumption in the macronutrient methodology. So here we have the second major thing, which is assuming that all the macronutrients that we're consuming are being burned in essentially the same way. There's just a differential in calories. This is false. It's not. And so the problem is that if all you're doing in that way of managing the lifestyle, right, there's no biomarker analysis going on, then there can be problems. And I'm speaking of this now from the point of view of experience. One of the things is it's very common for people to calculate the percent of carbs at every single meal. And I've actually had this conversation, right? And they go something along these lines. Well, I only had 5% carbs at breakfast. I only had 5% carbs at lunch, and I only had 5% carbs at dinner. So why am I not in ketosis? Well, here's the issue with that. First, we assumed a certain amount of calories that went into this program, right? Like I just grabbed out of the sky pretty much 2,200 calories. My percentages were based on that. Then when you're calculating the percentage at every single meal, at the end of the day, when you add that up, you can be over 50 grams of total carbs really, really easy, right? So that's a problem. How would you know this otherwise? All right. So how can you bring that level of measuring? And before I get to how can you take that style of managing this lifestyle and make it work better for you, before I get to that, forget it. I lost my train of thought. Forgive me. So let's just talk about the measurement. How can you make this work better for you? Well, number one, there's a lot of people out there that are actually measuring, that are weighing food out. And, that's definitely one method that you can use for this. It's more accurate because then if you're getting out of ketosis, you actually have something that you can, physically modify. But that still leaves you with trying to evaluate the ketosis. So I believe that with the macronutrient, the percentages, there's really two questions that people need to ask themselves. How rigorous do you want to know whether or not you're actually improving your situation or not? Like, how rigorous do you want to be about that? And there's two ways you can measure biomarkers. In the plate method that I just talked about, I advocate for doing this out of the gate. For the macronutrient, there are two ways. The first is getting on a scale and knowing your weight, doing the blood pressure thing, and then measuring the glucose and the ketones. And I'm going to come back to the idea that this is so powerful. You're taking back your health, because in the macronutrient methodology, what you can do, especially in the early days of using this, is that you've got your lunch prepared, right? Sitting there in front of you, and you did it by calculating percentages. All right, go measure your glucose and go get your ketones before you even take a bite of it. Then you eat the meal and you grab your post-glucose and your post-ketones. You do it if you want to keep things easy, at 1 hour and 2 hour, and you see where you're at, right? And if the glucose it's up there and the ketones are down or obliterated, then you know the percentage that you chose is too high in the carbohydrates. And now you can modify that plate how you want to do it, right? The other type of biomarker monitoring and what people do with this is up to them. It's an individual choice. But I remember when I was pre-diabetic, I got this sweet little email that said, change your lifestyle, exercise more, and then come back and we'll do your bloods again 6 months later. Okay, for me, that was just completely unacceptable, right? Am I in a rush for this? Do I expect my lifestyle change to be a pill? No, I don't. But honestly, this business of being significantly overweight with the chronic health conditions that can come with it, the diabetes, the cardiovascular disease, which I believe I'm susceptible to, by the way, I'm just putting it out there. Also, the gout suffering. I wanted to have an efficient method, right? So I suggest having the bloods done every 3 months rather than 6 months, right? And this is what I held to in the early days, right? In the first year of me being in the lifestyle, I stuck to having my bloods done every 3 years. And I didn't ask the doctor's permission, right? You get into a conversation with them and they don't want to measure this and they don't want to measure that. They don't want to submit it to the insurance. So I paid for it myself, right? And there's going to be some people that are going to go, God, Dr. Pete, I don't want to do that. That's expensive. But then when you put this in balance, right, what would it mean if I would have transitioned to being full-time diabetic and on medications and insulin, and then down the road, the things that come with that, and the medical expenses, not even mentioning the devastation to your life, right? Your family, your ability to do things anymore, right? The expense is massive. So when you put biomarker monitoring in the context of that, the strips really aren't that expensive, right? In the context of what I'm talking about here. And neither is getting $300 worth of blood work every 3 months for a year, because the sense of well-being and success that comes from that is overwhelming. It's overwhelming to be able to look at my numbers, which I have right here. I just released another video about this in the area of gout. These numbers, they tell me that I've reversed my diabetes. They tell me that it was safe for me to go on the ketogenic diet with gout. This is something that I understand. Why? Because I measure the numbers myself, right? And this is the knowledge that you get. And not only that, but when I compare these numbers to the literature, they're doing exactly what the VertaHealth studies say this should happen, and in similar time frames. Now, how is that for well-being? Does it guarantee I'm going to live a long, happy life? No, it doesn't. But it means to me that I'm not going to be injecting insulin in a year, because I can see my A1C and my fasting glucose with my bare eyes, and I can compare it to the literature, and I know that I am doing the best that I can. Now, in terms of the two methodologies, whether you want to go the intuitive or whether you want to go the percent macros, it doesn't matter to me how you want to do that. And I'm not saying that one method is better over the other, right? This is a matter of finding what works for you. But one thing I do believe in that should be done regardless of either of the two methods that you pick, if you really want to know or understand your situation with the amount of carbs that you can eat, whether you're reversing the condition you want to reverse, measure the biomarkers. And in the case of the percent macros, it needs to be held, that system needs to be held accountable for the problem areas that I talked about, most specifically the ballparking of the total calories that you're eating, and then the assumption that you're burning all the fat and the protein that you eat. Those things are wishy-washy, right? They need to be, if you go into that, just go into that understanding. And then why measure the biomarkers using that method? So that you can turn around, troubleshoot what you're doing, and make viable changes, just like in the intuitive method. If I eat a plate of food in the intuitive method and my fasting glucose is high, my ketones are low, then I know I got into too many carbs the day before. The next time I have that meal, what am I going to do? It's not complicated. I'm going to just decrease what I think was the offending particular food type. And after a few years, you're going to have a pretty good idea what that is. All right, with that, this is Dr. Pete, and I'm going to stop talking now and turn the room back over to Tanner. That is the masterclass for today. So if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat. Remember, we're live on YouTube, live on Facebook, and live on Clubhouse right now. Anyone in Clubhouse that wants to come up and jam about this, please come up. We would love to have you, especially this is our last show for right now.
All right, guys, this is Keto Makes Me Healthy, intuitive eating versus macro counting. We definitely use the intuitive way of eating keto, which again is the 3-plate method that my dad just recently talked about. If you do have any questions or comments or anything, if you are experiencing counting your macros and want to come up and talk about it, please come up and talk. Hi, Anna. How are you? Good. Hi, guys. Happy Monday. Happy birthday.
Good morning.
Feels like a Saturday due to the holiday weekend. But I know it's nice. So, Dr. Pete, I was intrigued by your A1C of 5.1 with average glucose of 80 in the 80s. My A1C is 5.0 as of less than 3 months ago. I do check every 3 months. And my average glucose is, in the hundreds, 108 typically. So, wondering, what math is happening there. Because I would expect with an average glucose of in the 80s to be, in the 4s, 4.0, 4.8, 4.9 at least. No?
Well, actually, here's the thing, and I did raise the issue, and I know that you know about this, is that everyone's an individual. And so there are contributing, let me clarify, on the morning of my most recent bloods, which was in early June, my fasting glucose was 74. And looking back, not quite a year, it wasn't a year, 6 or 7 months, my fasting glucose was 78, so they're pretty close. My A1C is 5.0 for both of those blood work analyses. Now, the number that I quoted, 87, that's literally just taking every value of glucose measurement that's in my Keto Moho that I've written down, actually, because I keep a written log too, for almost 3 years now, and literally just average them. So,
I'm just wondering if there's any other factors that play a role in your A1C versus just your glucose. And I know it's not just fasting. It's your glucose throughout a 24-hour period. Because I would expect, average blood sugars in the 70s and 80s to be way below 5. So, because like in my case it's 5, but my average glucose is in the hundreds. So it's like I said, it's 108, and I do wear CGM. I've been wearing CGMs for a while, so I know this for a fact, and I test my markers, which is why I'm such a fan of yours, because I'm a tester, and that's what I advocate as well. even though I'm not ketogenic, I do manage my blood sugars very tightly. So yeah, any other factors that would impact your A1C numbers?
Yeah, I'm going to just tell you right now, you're asking a really good question. I don't know the answer to it. One thing that I've learned over the years, just testing on myself, is that I think my carbohydrate tolerance is actually really low. And then I partake in really intense exercise, and I know that when I measure my values there, that pre and then post exercise, like starting with literally right after the exercise, like a HIIT exercise, and then at a half an hour, 1 hour, and 2 hours, that my my blood glucose can be quite high there. So, I don't know the answer to the question that you're answering. There's, when it boils down to it, I think there's a lot of gray area in this. And I think I always just return to the idea that we all have different glucose tolerances, and trying to learn what those are for a particular person takes time. And like you said, the biomarker measuring that you do and seeing how you react to this stuff, and then trying to make sense out of what your own program is. And I know that sometimes I have a high fasting glucose, and I did this morning, actually. You want to know the truth of it? It was 101. But I'm pretty certain I know why, because I had a meal last night that typically will spike my fasting glucose in the morning. So anyway, I have
a theory about microbiome and the health of your gut. In that, because again, just like you, I've been playing around with macros and testing for a while. And when I introduced carbs back in after being strict low carb keto for 4 years, my blood glucose stabilized and got even better. I mean, they got fantastic at the beginning of my journey, like within the first year or two. They were beautiful. But then the more ketogenic I was, my glucose, started climbing up again. So I introduced carbs back in last year, and they dropped again. But I still struggle with the fasting, which I have already confirmed that. And again, this is because I test, and I wear a CGM, that I do have that dawn phenomenon thing going on in the morning. So I do that is my normal, to have higher blood sugars in the morning. But regardless of that, my A1C is 5.0, but my average glucose is still in the hundreds, like 108. My 106, 108 would be my average. And I noticed that once I started working on my gut and implementing fiber to my diet, that's when the numbers started dropping again. So I know there's an aspect of gut health to manage blood sugars too. So I wanted to know if you have come across that too.
No, it's like trying to organize myself for these sessions or whatever, but the issue of the gut biome is massive, and there's more. I mean, this is a field, really, I believe, that's exploding right now, and what you're describing is really consistent with that, and it's something that is in the back of my mind. Like, I've been playing around with the fiber a little bit myself too, trying to find healthy sources of that they haven't already killed with vegetable oils or whatever. And thinking about the low carb vegetables that I already eat and seeing if I can improve that situation, and then watching what happens in my system. So I think perhaps you hit the nail on the head, actually.
Thank you. Okay, Simona, also welcome to the stage. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Hi, thank you so much. So I just jumped on and was listening a little bit of what Ida was saying. I also have the Dawn phenomenon, the Dawn syndrome, where my numbers will be higher in the morning. I'm type 2 diabetic. I'm not on any medication, but recently, within the last 2 weeks, I had all my blood work done. I'm strict ketogenic. I'm really doing well with it. But I was a little bit disappointed with my A1C. It was 6.2, and my glucose, fasting glucose, through the blood work, was 131. So I'm just a little bit concerned with, why is it so high? I was also asking myself, well, what was my what was my numbers previously? And to tell you the truth, I don't remember, because I hadn't had it taken in a while. I was kind of avoiding it. And then I thought, once I got on this ketogenic lifestyle that I'm on this journey for the past 3 months, I thought, well, I need to get a benchmark to see where I am so I can improve from there. But yes, I was just concerned with how do I get it even lower. And yeah, that's kind of what my comments are and my questions. Thank you so much. I'll be listening in.
Well, congratulations on your progress. So I work with type 2 diabetics, and one thing that I've seen, like, my situation was different because I was pre-diabetic, and fortunate for me, it was caught early, right? But my experience with the type 2s that I work with is that this transition takes longer. And today we were talking about the two different methodologies. And so what I'm going to say next matters for both of them. What you've got to remember is that really the goal here is to be as low as you can on carbs every time you put something in your mouth. And even if it's keto approved food, what you eat and when you eat it matters. All right. So I'm going to give you an example. Again, this is coming from me and my own numbers. And I understand, Simona, that we're different people and you may not see the same effect. However, I think there was a lesson in this for me. So my first year on keto, every day. So firstly, I did not eat my morning meal until between 10 and 12. I'm still doing that, for the record. But I was eating at that meal a salad that had a high-fat dressing on it that I made myself with keto-approved vegetables, and then small amounts of protein that I had made for dinner the night before. And I did that for about a year, and my average ketones were 2.3, and my fasting glucose was actually, when I first measured it, went to a lab and had it measured, was actually 56. They were a little, like, my doctor later was like, this is really low, did you experience it? And the answer is no, because I was in ketosis. This is one of the things about being in ketosis. My average ketones were 2.3. Now, then later we had COVID hit, and I'm working at home. I was working at home. I was still teaching then. I quit my teaching career to do this full time, and I'm almost out of my savings. But anyway, I'm digressing. So I've been here a year at home. And so that morning meal changed because I was able to cook. And so I basically started eating 3 eggs and then some type of breakfast meat. Sometimes it's protein from the night before, like leftover chicken, or, maybe it was part of a steak or whatever, or, whatever it is. And then I didn't change how I was eating my evening meal, which I make sure to have finished by 6 in the evening, so that I have a quite a large fasting gap between when I finish my evening meal and I go to sleep, and then the next day when I eat. And what I've seen by switching from the salad and the protein to 3 eggs and some kind of breakfast meat is my average ketones have dropped from about 2.0 to 1.3 or 1.0, about between right in there. And my fasting glucose has risen. So what you eat and when you eat matters. And what I would suggest, there's a couple things here. First, because you said you are diagnosed as type 2, it's probably going to take longer for your system to normalize than someone like me who was pre-diabetic and caught early, right? I think it's going to happen for you for sure. The other thing is to always double down when in doubt. And what do I mean by that? Think, instead of thinking, all right, I've calculated this out and I'm at 50 grams of total carbs per day. I did not violate that. Instead, look at it from the point of view of each meal. and keeping the carbs as low as possible at every time you eat. Even if you venture into snacks, be careful, how many nuts you have. Be careful if it's cheese, how many slices of cheese you have. You want to search for your satiation point versus what we learned to do on the standard American diet. So keeping the carbs low every single time you put something in your mouth, and then try to step back and objectively say, all right, what am I eating at each of these meals each day? And what is the timing exactly? And just try to objectively do that without, and I do this all the time. I mean, I've been thinking about this 3-egg thing and the breakfast meat now for a year because I saw my ketones, my average fasting ketones go down, and my fasting glucose, I'm above the normal range in glucose now more often than I was previously. And I think Ada was getting at this too, thinking about like, all right, let's change this up a little. Keep it. I say this to all my people, keep it low, down the road we go. So thinking, all right, I need to I'm going to go back to really slamming down on keeping the carbs low. And then what if I change back? And I'm going to just tell you right now, I have changed back to eating that salad with just a few pieces of protein, but with a really fatty dressing. And what have I seen? I've seen my fasting glucose go down. It moves out of the normal range less often, and my ketones go right back to 2.0. So anyway, I think I went on long enough. This is Dr. Pete. I'm going to stop talking now and see if Simone, if you got more questions.
Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. Now, a couple questions. When you say your ketone levels are 2.0 or you're testing that way, are you testing through blood? Because I just was testing with the strips, with the urine strips. That's how I tested. But I am a type 2. Of course, I test mine constantly. I'm like a fanatic about testing my blood sugar. So I do test quite a bit during the day. And it does go down to, 58, sometimes I'm at 70, sometimes 89. It just depends if I'm active or I'm exercising or I'm walking briskly, that kind of thing. I've done intermittent fasting where I do I've even done 51 hours. That was my longest fast. But I have done the 16-8, 23-1. I mean, I've been changing it up a little bit with the fasting as well. But I guess my question is this. Now, is there a direct correlation with the actual cholesterol? Because my cholesterol came back at 171, but then my triglycerides were a little bit higher. Wait a second, I'm going to look for it real quickly here. Just give me one moment. I have it right here. My triglycerides were 125, HDL 49, LDL 98, and then the glucose was 131, but the total cholesterol was 170. So
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that has any correlation with my type 2.
Yes, it's related. So there was a lot in what you said. So the first, okay, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about this, and then you can decide about the lipid issue. So first is that I finger stick for glucose and for ketones, the Keto Moho meter, and I know that there are some others too that will do glucose and ketones, and I always measure them together. Now the glucose is a surrogate for insulin. So when you take a glucose reading, if it's high, that also means that your insulin is high as well, because when that glucose goes up, your body's going to respond by generating the insulin to try and ram it into, your organs, into the cells. It's predominantly the liver, adipocytes, and muscle tissue. So that's why I'm saying I always measure my glucose and my ketones at the same time, because if insulin's being expressed, your ketones are going to be in the ditch. It's that simple. They're profoundly sensitive to the amount of insulin that's out there, because insulin is what's down regulating your capability to fat burn, and it's causing you to store I don't want to use the word calories, but it's just at the top of my mind right now, to store incoming burnable energy as fat. That's what's going on with that. So it's shutting down your fat burning capabilities. Now, in terms of a diabetic platform, it's not just about the glucose and the A1C. It's also about your lipid profile, your inflammatory markers like high sensitivity CRP protein. In a gout sufferer, but I also recommend this with my clients. You should be measuring uric acid too, because millions of people are walking around with high uric acid and don't really even recognize it, and because they haven't had a case of gout. And uric acid is turning out to be a player also in all of this stuff, but it's not something that the medical community actually will measure because you don't have gout, right? So they just don't measure it. And so it's one of those things that I would look at. Now, what I found, I can just tell you what my experience was. My lipid profile has taken significantly longer for it to correct by comparison to A1C and fasting glucose. So what's really important, and like you said, you got a benchmark, is to keep measuring those factors. And what I did for a while was I measured every 3 months, and that's why I can sit here right now and actually tell you numbers. So, over time, what you should see is your HDL should rise nicely, and the triglycerides should go down. The LDL question, and I know I've seen you on Clubhouse a lot. You should look for rooms with Dave Feldman, because I believe that he's the premier expert on the lipidology of all this business in the world at this point. And he will tell you flat out that nobody really knows the story about the LDL. Is it good? Is it bad? Nobody really knows that. So, I don't really take my LDL, which I don't have it right here in front of me, that seriously. I look at my HDL and my triglycerides, and at the time I was pre-diabetic, my triglycerides were 108, and now they're 67, and my HDL started at 39, and now it's 58, and the ratio of my TGs to my HDL is right at 1. So my point is not getting stuck on the numbers, that everything in my system has moved in the correct direction. And Feldman will tell you that he thinks that the HDL and the triglycerides are probably the most important marker for the cardiovascular condition. And that the story on the LDL is one which is still out there yet to be determined. And the cholesterol, I wouldn't even worry about it, because I've seen solid literature in this area that has debunked the idea that cholesterol itself is a serious marker for cardiovascular disease. And I see that Ada has unmiked herself, so maybe she wants to jump in here.
Well, I'm so sorry. I did want to jump in, but I had no idea I was muted. I'm sorry if that was disrupting. Sorry. But since you did bring it up, I wanted to go back to Simona, just to give you my example. I also had, even prior to going low carb, I had high cholesterol. For years, and the doctor always pushes statins, and of course I always declined. And going low carb did not help my cholesterol in terms of the LDL, by the way, but it significantly improved my triglycerides. I mean, my triglycerides was down in the 40s. HDL has never risen, to the numbers that I would like to see, which is like 70, 80, 90, but they are in a healthy 50, almost 60 number range. So that's great. Like Dr. P mentioned, you want those two numbers to be good when you're in a low carb way of eating versus focusing on the LDL. And of course, if you're really concerned about those, always getting a CC score, which mine was 0, getting a particle size, I'm a partner A, so I'm good all around there. But I wanted to bring up the notion again of fiber, because ever since I started eating more fiber and actually come out of ketosis, even though still low carb but not ketogenic, my LDL actually went down for the first time ever in my entire life. Low carb, no carb, full carb, ever. My LDL is like beautiful, and my surprisingly enough, even though I'm eating carbs again, my triglycerides remain in a very healthy range of 60s. Even though I'm eating carbs. But that is because of the fiber that I have implemented in my diet. And my HDL remains in a very healthy range. And what else? And again, like I said, my glucose and my A1C has gone down since making that small change. So, and again, just everything just to come back to boil it down into what's going on with my gut. I'm just passionate about the gut now because I have noticed how focusing on that, not so much in lowering carbs even more, because I tested all percentages and ranges and macros. Like I said, that's why I like Dr. B, because I'm the forever data gatherer. I love testing, and I do also have a spreadsheet with all of my numbers. I test. Now I wear CGM, but before wearing CGMs the past 4 years, I was pricking my fingers 8 times a day because I love numbers. So I can tell you that has been the pivotal change for me. I'm a big fan of still doing a carbohydrate restriction. I think everybody should do that. But is ketosis really the golden ticket? How do you feel, Dr. Pete, about actually cycling in and out and actually like flexing? A carb day or something like that, or high fiber foods. Who knows? Maybe that's the new golden ticket. And just wanted to throw that out there. What has worked for me in terms of all of my markers, including glucose as a pre-diabetic. That's my main focus. Oh, and by the way, my insulin has never gone above 5. And again, I test every 3 months.
That's awesome. Oh, I'm sorry, Simona. I didn't mean to cut you off. Just let me, I was going to say, we'll come to you again in 1 nanosecond. Ada, can you just quickly give us an idea of the fiber foods that you're eating? Because this is really, I think it's a really important issue. And, so just a really couple high fiber foods that you're hitting.
Not only am I pushing, because of course I want, and I'm a huge advocate for real food, whole food, number 1. But I actually do supplement with the fiber supplements. But fibrous foods, and I love bitter greens because I go with the Dr. Lustig's phrase of protecting the liver and feeding the gut. So I like any prebiotic green cruciferous vegetables. So I eat a lot of asparagus and watercress and arugula, all the leafy greens, anything that's going to provide me with prebiotic fiber, this insoluble fiber. I'm not necessarily talking about that bulky fiber to make you poop. We want the fiber that's going to feed your microbiota. So prebiotic fibers, both in real food and supplementation, it's what has been the golden ticket for me, because again, I've been fighting with gut issues forever because of chronic antibiotic usage from an early age with chronic throat infections and also lifestyle changes, alcohol usage and super stressed lifestyle. So all of that affects my gut. Not to mention I'm from an island, parasites, all that good stuff. So it's been an ongoing journey to heal my gut, yes. But in terms of my blood markers, I'm still not perfect in my gut. And how do I know that? I still bloat, very regularly. So I know that I still have issues. But in terms of my blood markers, adding fiber, both from whole food sources and supplementation, was what it was the magic ticket for me. Thank you, Francie.
Simona?
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, Ada, that was one of the questions I was going to ask. What is she, advocating for the fiber? Would it be something like a sweet potato? And see, that kind of fiber for me, if I eat any of that, absolutely, I'm skyrocketed with my numbers. So I really have to stay with
I would recommend the green one. wants, fibrous vegetables, and if sweet potato is fine, but if you react to it, also remember, you may react at the beginning just because you haven't used it in a long time. It's I'm an advocate that the body will adjust to whatever you train it to. So, like I said, when I started implementing fiber, it gave me the opposite effect. But I was testing, so I needed to put in the work and not just give up just because I'm reacting to it. I had to give it time for the body to adjust, because being ketogenic for a while, your microbiome changes. It does. So when you start to introduce new things, you may react to that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that your body's not used to it. So you have to give it the time to adjust to it. And now I'm able to tolerate it, so I don't react to certain things when after I got my system adjusted to it. It's just like anything, like let's say MCT oil. When we first start drinking MCT oil, you may have a laxative effect from it. So you have to start like really, really tiny. Now I'm able to tolerate 4 tablespoons of MCT oil without having to rush to the bathroom. But it wasn't like that at the beginning, right? So it's giving the body time to adjust to these things and keeping a close eye and monitoring your symptoms, of course. What do you think about that, Dr. B?
No, I agree with that completely. I mean, it's trial and error. It's like I said at the beginning of this, you try things, right? And you're monitoring so you can make adjustments. And, the one thing about the cycling question comes up. So I think it all depends on what your carb tolerance is, right? And I know mine's pretty small.
You can
go ahead.
react. Not only on the water weight, for example, that was a huge marker for me to track. Like one off-plan meal would nice, just attention from one off-plan meal. But that's because I had not done that. I don't do that regularly. But now my water gain is, if I gain a pound, it's like, wow, I already knew I ate way too many carbs. But it's only 1 pound versus, 5 to 8, last year. So I think your body adjusts to it. No?
I know I'm not disagreeing with you for sure. Like I have experimented the last year with adding carbs into my own life. Part of that has to do with the exercise program that I'm in and trying to adequately recover and all that. So I'm not against it by any stretch of the imagination or the concept of cycling. But what I'm saying is some of us, like if we are diabetics, have that platform, have to really be careful. So it's like you said, you try it, you can adjust. And then, maybe there's a window for that. I think the window for that in me is just smaller than the window might be for someone else who wants to do that. But listen, we've been going now almost an hour and a half. So to be respectful of everyone's time or whatever, I would like to close the room pretty soon. So if anyone wants to come up and jump in with another question, or Ada, you have something else you want to
No, thank you. This has been awesome. I love hearing you. I'm a tracker like you, so thank you for the platform.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Trying to do my best to help, people that want to do this lifestyle and be successful. Simona, did you have another question or something that you wanted to?
No, that's fine. I don't want to keep you any longer. Kind of jumped in on the tail end of this session, but I'm going to definitely follow you back and just be a little bit more mindful on, like you said, the carbs and what you're eating. So I was always having a little bit of a problem with tracking the macros and just making sure that I get the amount in that I need for the day. And then once I start fasting, and I felt great fasting, I didn't feel like eating. So of course, we know if you don't eat, you need to feed the body. So I was struggling a little bit with that as well. But I'm going to DM you, and I don't have the name of the person that you told me that you wanted me to follow. I forgot what the name was, but if you could message me that name, I certainly will look up that guy. Yeah,
no worries. DM me and I'll provide you with the name. His name's Dave Feldman, but just in case you forget, I'll make sure to IG you back and let you know about that.
Dave Feldman, got it. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. This has been great.
I'd like to just say thank you to everyone who came to the last part of our masterclass. We're not gone; we will be back, but the main overarching theme will be different for the next session that we do. Remember, we started this one with an analysis of sugar consumption in the U.S. And the reason that we did that is because there's a lot of people that can improve their condition if that's the minimum that they do with this. Just stop eating the refined carbohydrates. That will help a lot. And then there are others like myself, other diabetics, depending on how serious chronic disease is, that you're going to have to dig deeper. And that's really where we wanted to end up with this. So I produce educational videos. You can find me at Dr. Pete's Keto Club spelled with a K. Like Simone, Simona, feel free to IG us if you have any questions. And in any case, everyone have a really, really good day. And we will see you on the flip flop.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You're welcome.
Thank you.